All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. All three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be showing you my complete Kate Elliott book collection. I've got a bunch of her books, probably not all of her books. I know she's published more books than what I have, but these are the ones I have. And I've been collecting Kate Elliott novels since the early 1990s when I first discovered her book Jaran. And so let's get to it. Let's talk about Kate Elliott, one of the best writers, storytelling, character-wise, and prose that you're going to find in the fantasy genre. In fact, one of the inspirations for my own books and how I write books was the world-building skills of Kate Elliott. I absolutely adored her Crown of Stars. I think it's the Crown of Stars. Yeah, sometimes, yep, I was right. Crown of Stars. Read each book about 3 times. I should know what it's called. But anyway, let's get started with the 2 books of hers that I have not read yet. And those are these 2 new ones. 2 books in a space opera series that she just started from, it looks like Tor Books. This is Furious Heaven, book number 2 in the Sun Chronicles, and this is Unconquerable Sun, book number 1 in the Sun Chronicles. I honestly don't know what they're about. They look like space opera. I'll read the back of the first book to give us an idea what these are about. So, the legend lives. Never forget that you are the unconquerable sun. Rebellion comes. This business with Perseus can't have been an accident. Be alert for more trouble. Your enemies still use his death as an excuse to plant yet another spy in your midst. Princess Sun has finally come of age. Growing up in the shadow of her mother, Wherein, has not been an easy task. The legendary Queen Marshal did what everyone thought impossible: expel the invaders and build Chaonia into a magnificent republic, one to be respected and feared. But the cutthroat ambassador corps and conniving noble houses have never ceased to scheme, and they have plans that need Sun to be removed as heir, or better yet, dead. To survive, the princess must rely on her wits and companions, her biggest rival, her secret lover, and a dangerous prisoner of war. Sounds like pretty good space opera, fare to me. We'll see what. We'll eventually get to it. Now let's talk about the first ever books that I bought of Kate Elliott's. Also great space opera. And that started with this book, Jaran. And I was quite taken with the cover. As you know, I was young when I bought this in the early 90s. Let's see when it was published. And this is the copy that I bought. It was published in 1992. Yeah, it's about when I bought it. I liked the cover, a Jim Burns cover, Daw Books. And this series had 4 books in it. Jaran, An Earthly Crown. Let's see. His Conquering Sword, another great illustration by Jim Burns. Probably one of my favorite Jim Burns illustrations. That's just dynamite. And it wraps around and everything. And then we've got The Law of Becoming. And those are the 4 books in the series. What were these books? I mean, first of all, they're very unique, very unique. I've read them once, and I remember just being blown away with the unique world-building environment that she created for this space opera series. I'll reread the back of this one just so we can get an idea. So, Tess had been cursed by an accident of birth to be the sister of the one man honored by the alien conquerors of human-run space. Her brother, Charles, the leader of Earth's rebellion, had been given a dukedom after his defeat and now ruled over far distant worlds. And Tess was his only heir, a position and responsibility that she was not yet willing to assume. So she fled to a world in her brother's domain A world where she was soon to discover the alien conquerors were themselves mixed up in some covert and dangerous mission. And despite herself, Tess was suddenly forced to become both player and pawn in an interstellar game of intrigue and politics caught between the protecting her brother's interests and her own growing involvement with Elliott, the leader of the nomadic tribe with whom she has taken shelter. Anyway, things spiral out of control from there. The thing that I do remember about this was it was a space opera with these big spaceships, and they were just flying over sort of these grassy plains filled with these nomadic warriors. And I think it was best illustrated in this illustration right here. Horses and spaceships. A great combination, and Kate Elliott does a masterful job. I loved that series. Now, my favorite series that she's written, and probably one of my top 10 favorite fantasy series of all time, is The Crown of Stars. But we will get to that last. Let's talk about another great fantasy trilogy she wrote that I really enjoyed. And a well-known, as I was on my way to becoming published, a well-known editor who just happened to edit these 3 books, told me that I should study these 3 books if I wanted to learn how to write really good religion in fantasy. So a lot of people say that they love my books because of the world building, the massive scope of the world building, especially how I do the religious conflicts in my world. Well, a lot of that I learned from this trilogy by Kate Elliott, and also some of the stuff that was going on in The Crown of Stars. So this series is about these eagle riders. You can see they're like eagle lance, right? They got lances and they're riding the eagles, and each one of them is riding a bird. Great covers, by the way. And this series is called the Crossroads series, Book 1, Spirit Gate, Book 2, Shadow Gate, and Book 3, Traitor's Gate. And they are absolutely just, they kind of remind me a lot of what Robin Hobb does. If you like Robin Hobb with flying eagles and people riding them, you're going to love these books. These are just great. The character development in these really reminded me of Robin Hobb. Sort of, but I will read the back of this one just so you can get an idea of what it is. So, for generations, the immortal guardians were the unseen protectors of the lands of the 100. Eagle reeves, sworn to honor and protect the land, patrolled the skies, keeping peace in the realm. But now a shadow has fallen across the land. A horde of marauders has swept down upon one city after another, leaving death and devastation in its wake. Worst of all, the guardians seem to have abandoned the land, leaving its people hopeless, defenseless against the fanatical horde, which is led by a mysterious figure cloaked in legend. Yet, all hope is not lost. Captain Angie and his disciplined troops, drawn into the conflict by the winds of fate, discover the fearsome shadow which has seized the land and so terrified its people. Their destinies are entwined with those of the Reeves and who have already tasted the bitterness, loss, and yada, yada, yada. It just turns into a fantasy adventure after that. And it's pretty good. It's really good. Excellent series of books right there. Now let's talk about my favorite Kate Elliott series, and that is 7-book epic fantasy series called Crown of Stars. I've talked about this a lot. I think I have reviewed the first 3 books on my channel. First book being King's Dragon. If you want to see a detailed review of this book, just type in my last name into your YouTube search bar, King's Dragon, and that video review will magically appear upon your television screen. That's how the internet works. And King's Dragon is book number 1. Great illustrations by Jody Lee. Book number 2 is Prince of Dogs, an even better illustration by Jody Lee. Book number 3 is The Burning Stone, probably my favorite book of the group. Another magnificent illustration by Jody Lee. Book number 4, Child of Flame. Another illustration by Jody Lee. Book number 5, The Gathering Storm. book number 6, In the Ruins, a Jody Lee painting, but not necessarily my favorite. And then, last but certainly not to be considered the least, Crown of Stars, the 7th book in the series. And when we have all 7 books lined up on the shelf, they all look like they match on the shelf together. It's just a really cool, those just look badass on the shelf. Well, I mean, there's a few differences, the first 3 books have the little picture in the middle, and then they sort of abandoned that graphic design choice and go without the. I'll forgive that. It still irritates me some, though. It just fucking does. But we'll forgive it for now, just because the books are so dope, and we can't hold Kate Elliott responsible for the decisions of the publisher. However, that being said, those still all look super cool on the shelf together. And again, one of the best fantasy series in the history of the world. If you've seen my top 10 fantasy series of all time, you know that these books are in my top 10. And if you want a little more detail on what those books are about, like I said, just search for my first review of the book number 1. Watch that one. It'll give you all the information you need. But if you're a fantasy fan, you most definitely need to read Kate Elliott. If you love space opera books, you most definitely need to read her space operas. I know she's written a few steampunk books and a few other things, which I can't speak to, but I imagine they're pretty dope, just because everything she writes is pretty dope. Maybe eventually I'll get those. We'll see. But as of now, this is my entire Kate Elliott book collection.